Imagine opening your inbox on a Tuesday morning.
Right, just a normal Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. And you have a message from your notoriously blunt project manager. Normally, her emails consist of like 3 words and 0 punctuation. Just fix this, thanks.
We all have that one manager.
Oh, for sure. But today you are staring at this massive 5-paragraph opus. It's brimming with phrases like, I hope this email finds you well as we endeavor to synergize our departmental objectives to navigate this dynamic landscape.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
Right. Your first thought isn't, wow, she really improved her vocabulary overnight. Your first thought is, who hacked her account?
Or, more likely these days, which algorithm wrote this?
Exactly. And that brings us to today. Welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are someone who actively thinks about how you communicate. You want to be understood, you want to be effective, and you really value the nuances of human connection. So today, we are diving into a huge stack of notes from a premier language and business communication show. We are looking at this massive, fundamental paradigm shift in how we write, speak, and connect.
It really is a shift. We're looking at the intersection of linguistics and artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, and what is basically being called the great homogenization of the human voice.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that phrase they use in the source material, outsourcing cognition, that's heavy.
It is heavy. It's fundamentally altering the DNA of corporate communication. We're moving way past just using tools to check our spelling.
Right, like spell check is ancient history at this point.
Yeah. We're entering an era where we are handing over the actual formulation of our thoughts to machines. So it's a shift from outsourcing physical tasks or even data retrieval to literally outsourcing cognition itself.
When you think about it, when the internet became mainstream, we outsourced memory. Like we didn't need to memorize the capital of Peru or the exact year the printing press was invented.
Because search engines just held that data for us.
Exactly. But we still had to take that retrieved data and form our own arguments. We still had to figure out how to actually articulate a point.
Yeah, you still had to do the mental heavy lifting.
But now we're looking at a technology where you don't even have to form the argument. You just type a vague sentiment, and the machine constructs the logical flow. It selects the vocabulary. It dictates the tone. It's the most disruptive technological advancement to hit the workplace since email itself.
Oh, without a doubt. And we really need to figure out what this means for you, the listener, and how you can protect your unique communication style in a world that is, rapidly becoming algorithmically driven.
So where do we even start with this? The scale of it is just huge.
Well, to understand the sheer scale of the disruption, we have to look past the immediate novelty of the tech. We have to examine the structural linguistic changes happening right in front of us.
Right, because on the surface, it looks pretty great, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. The democratization of flawless grammar looks like a massive win at first glance. Like, a non-native speaker can instantly produce a memo that reads like it was written by a native-speaking executive.
Or if you're just paralyzed by writer's block, you can generate 3 paragraphs of perfectly structured text in seconds. The efficiency gains are they're undeniable.
They are, but the collateral damage of all that efficiency is the total eradication of idiosyncrasy. We are basically witnessing the blandification of English.
So blandification, I love that term. But I think we need to look under the hood to understand why this blandification actually happens. It's easy to just say, AI is boring, but the mechanics behind it are what make this so inevitable.
Right, it's not trying to be boring. An LLM doesn't sit there and ponder the poetic weight of a word.
No, it doesn't have a soul or a childhood or like a specific regional dialect. It is just a probabilistic engine. It is literally doing incredibly complex math with words.
And that underlying architecture is the key to this whole phenomenon. When we say it's a probabilistic engine, we are talking about how it maps language. These models are trained on a massive corpus of text, which is essentially just scraping the entire internet.
Every forum, every blog, every corporate website.
Exactly. They take billions of words and map them into this multidimensional space based on how often they appear near each other. So words like coffee and mug are mathematically clustered together.
Which means words like leverage and synergy are tightly clustered in all those corporate data sets.
Yes. So when you ask an LLM to write an email, it isn't thinking about your request. It is calculating the most mathematically probable next word in a sequence over and over again.
It's taking the path of least resistance through that huge multidimensional map.
Always.
If it has to choose between a highly unique, slightly risky word and a perfectly safe, statistically common word, the map basically dictates it will choose the safe word every single time. It avoids the scenic route.
It actually actively penalizes the scenic route. In machine learning, there is this concept called the loss function.
Okay, what is that?
It's essentially the model's way of measuring how wrong a prediction is. The model is constantly trying to minimize loss. And the safest way to minimize loss is to choose the most statistically average response.
So by its very design, the architecture inherently regresses to the mean. It just averages everything out.
Exactly. It takes all the extreme highs of brilliant poetic prose, all the extreme lows of terrible broken English, and all the weird idiosyncratic quirks of everyday human language, and just mashes them into the safest, most mathematically predictable middle ground.
Which produces a very specific kind of text. I mean, it generates language that is undeniably grammatically flawless. You are not going to find a dangling modifier.
No, the syntax is perfectly robust.
But it reads like a pristine, completely empty vessel. Honestly, it reminds me of what Auto-Tune did to the music industry.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
All right. When Auto-Tune first dropped, producers used it to snap every single vocal note perfectly onto the pitch grid. The singer hits the note flawlessly every time. But in doing so, you strip out the raw emotional texture of a real human voice.
Yeah, you lose the subtle qualities.
You lose the slight breathiness, the vibrato, the tiny fractional flats and sharps that give a voice its actual character. AI is basically auto-tune for the written word. It snaps your messy human thoughts onto a perfect grammatical grid, but it completely removes the friction.
That's spot on. Auto-tune removes vocal friction, and LLMs remove cognitive friction. But that friction is where the humanity actually lives.
It really is. I mean, human communication is inherently messy. We stutter, we use strange metaphors that only make sense if you grew up in a certain town. We go off on tangents, we fragment our thoughts.
But those specific flaws are our linguistic fingerprint. They are what inject a human pulse into the writing.
Yep.
When you strip all of that away, you're left with the prime example you mentioned at the start of our deep dive, Let us leverage our synergistic capabilities. It's just a collection of buzzwords mathematically assembled to resemble a professional sentence.
But it contains absolutely zero actual meaning.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's look at the reality of the modern workplace.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am an overworked middle manager, right, and I have, 150 unread emails by 9 in the morning, I am not trying to write a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel.
Fair enough.
I'm just trying to communicate project updates, approve budgets, and schedule meetings. So isn't perfect grammar and highly professional, sterilized vocabulary exactly what people want in a corporate setting?
That is the argument, yeah.
I mean, I think we might be romanticizing the friction of typing out an email. If an employee uses AI to write an update report and is perfectly clear, polite, and it gets the job done in half the time, why is bland necessarily a bad thing?
That argument holds up perfectly if and only if we view human language strictly as a mechanism for the transfer of raw data.
Okay.
Like if you are just sending a list of inventory numbers or confirming a lunchtime, mathematically perfect, bland language is highly efficient. The problem arises because human communication, even in the most rigid corporate setting, is rarely just about data transfer.
Right. There's always subtext.
Always. It is almost always layered with relationship building, persuasion, hierarchy management, trust, and empathy. And when you apply mathematical blandness to those deeply human layers, it doesn't just become boring.
It becomes something worse.
Yeah, it becomes actively detrimental. It triggers a very specific, deeply unsettling psychological response.
Because we aren't just reading the words, right? We're reading the intent behind the words. And when the intent feels artificial, it pushes us into what the notes refer to as the linguistic uncanny valley.
Yes, the uncanny valley. We usually hear that term applied to robots or bad CGI in movies.
Oh yeah, like when a digital human looks 99% real, but the eyes are just a little too dead, and our primal brain just absolutely freaks out.
Exactly. The uncanny valley was originally coined in the 1970s by Masahiro Mori, who was a robotics professor. He charted human emotional response to robots.
And what did he find?
He found that as a robot becomes more human-like, our empathy toward it increases, but only up to a point, until it hits the specific dip where it looks almost perfectly human, but is just slightly off.
Like the skin texture lacks pores or something.
Right, or the micro-expressions are delayed by a millisecond. At that point, our emotional response just plunges into revulsion. We feel a profound sense of eeriness. And evolutionary biologists have a theory as to why this happens.
Oh, I bet. It's a survival mechanism, isn't it?
Totally. We evolved to be hypersensitive to slight deviations in human behavior and appearance to protect ourselves. A slight deviation might mean the person is sick with a pathogen, or it might mean they are actively deceiving us. Our brains are basically hardwired to sound an alarm when something looks human but doesn't quite act human.
And now we're experiencing that exact same evolutionary alarm bell, but through text. That is wild.
It is. The AI-generated email approaches that 99% mark of human thought. The grammar is perfect, the structure makes total sense.
But because it lacks that idiosyncratic fingerprint, our subconscious brain detects the absence of a human pulse. The text just feels like a simulation.
And this is exactly what causes the cognitive dissonance you described earlier with your notoriously blunt coworker. Your brain is holding two conflicting pieces of reality at the same time.
Consciously, I know the email address belongs to my coworker.
Right. But subconsciously, your linguistic pattern recognition software is screaming, "This is not her voice." It completely shatters the illusion of a genuine interaction.
It's like the invasion of the body snatchers, but confined to Microsoft Outlook. You're reading the email thinking, who is this? And what have you done with my project manager?
Precisely.
But let's escalate this, because a weirdly formal email about a budget update is one thing. Where this crosses the line from being mildly eerie to genuinely damaging is when we use this tech for sensitive, emotional communications.
Yes, the stakes get much higher here.
The notes highlighted some borderline dystopian applications that are actually happening right now in the real world. Think about a CEO using ChatGPT to write a mass email announcing company layoffs.
Oof. Yeah.
Or a manager using an LLM to draft a condolence letter to an employee who just lost a family member.
What's fascinating here is how quickly the efficiency argument falls apart in those scenarios. Using an algorithm to generate a condolence letter transcends mere laziness. It constitutes a profound breach of the social contract.
I couldn't agree more.
To understand why it feels so offensive to the recipient, we really have to look at the philosophical core of what empathy actually is. According to the source material, empathy fundamentally requires emotional labor.
Let's break down the mechanics of that emotional labor, because I think people forget what it actually takes. When a human sits down to write a difficult email, say, an apology to a client you really messed up with, or a condolence note, what is actually happening in the brain?
You're struggling. You stare at the blinking cursor. You type a sentence like, "I am so sorry for your loss."
And you delete it because it feels too cliche.
Exactly. You type another sentence and you delete that because it feels too cold. You are feeling a literal knot in your stomach because you are trying to project your own consciousness into the emotional state of the recipient.
You are expending finite cognitive energy to carefully select words that will provide comfort without causing offense. It's exhausting.
But that struggle is the actual mechanism of care. The friction of finding the words is the empathy. So when you automate that labor, you completely nullify the empathy.
You're basically sending a message that says, I recognize that a social convention requires me to express sympathy right now, but I do not value you enough to actually experience the discomfort of finding the words myself.
So I had a statistical engine generate a mathematically probable approximation of human care. That is what you're communicating. It is a simulacrum of empathy. It has the appearance of the thing without any of the substance.
Wow. So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, we all have overwhelming days where we just don't have the mental bandwidth to carefully craft a delicate response to a stressed colleague.
Sure, we've all been there.
If we use AI to handle that heavy lifting, we might think we are just being efficient, but we are actually signaling a complete lack of investment. We are eroding the interpersonal glue that holds teams together.
And the thing is, human beings are incredibly adept at detecting that simulacrum, even if they can't quite articulate it. The recipient might not consciously flag the email and say, oh, an LLM wrote this.
But they will feel a distinct lack of warmth.
Exactly. They will sense the hollow nature of the interaction. If an entire organizational culture adopts this for the sake of speed, you end up with a terrifying environment. Everyone is exchanging these flawlessly polite, perfectly grammatical paragraphs, yet everyone feels completely isolated, unseen, and unheard.
We achieve peak articulateness and zero connection. That is bleak.
It is.
Which brings us to a massive, ironic pivot in this whole landscape. We've just spent all this time dissecting how machines are taking over human-to-human communication, right?
Right.
But if the algorithms are writing our emails to each other, how are we communicating with the algorithms? We have to look at the entirely new linguistic discipline born from this tech, which is prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering is arguably the most unexpected linguistic evolution of the 21st century. It is literally the art and science of speaking to machines. And what becomes immediately apparent is that managing an AI requires a completely inverted lexical and syntactic framework compared to managing a human being.
Okay, let's look at that contrast. Think about how you manage a human. If you need a subordinate to pull data for you, you don't just walk up to their desk, point a finger, and bark. Synthesize Q3 data. Exclude marketing jargon. Execute.
Oh my God, if you did that, you'd be reported to HR by noon.
Instantly. Instead, you perform this complex linguistic dance. You use politeness markers, you use softeners, you use modal verbs.
You say things like, hey, sorry to bother you, but would you mind putting together a brief summary of the Q3 metrics when you get a chance?
No rush, just whenever you have bandwidth. We do this all the time.
And you are employing all of those linguistic softeners because you are managing a biological entity with an ego, with stress levels, and an acute awareness of social hierarchy. You are deliberately spending extra words to maintain the social fabric of the relationship while extracting the labor.
But when you interface with an artificial intelligence, that entire social fabric just evaporates.
Completely. With an LLM, politeness is not just unnecessary, it is actively detrimental to the quality of the output.
Because in the world of LLMs, every word you type is a token, and you are basically just wasting tokens.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of tokenization and what computer scientists call the attention mechanism within these models. An LLM processes your prompt by breaking it down into tokens, which are chunks of words, and then it allocates computational attention to figure out which tokens are the most important.
Okay.
When you include human niceties like please, thank you, or if you don't mind, you are forcing the AI to expend computational weight on those social markers. You are literally diluting the attention mechanism away from your core task.
Because the AI doesn't have an ego to stroke.
It doesn't get burned out. It doesn't care if you say please.
So you literally have to strip away all the humanity to get the machine to work properly. The notes provided an exact example of a highly optimized, effective prompt, and honestly, reading it out loud feels incredibly jarring.
Let's hear it.
A good prompt looks exactly like this. Act as a senior financial analyst. Synthesize the attached Q3 data into a 500-word executive summary. Use a professional, authoritative tone. Exclude all marketing jargon. Structure with bullet points.
Look at the syntax there. It is just a barrage of imperative constraints. Act, synthesize, use, exclude, structure. There is zero emotional nuance. It relies on extreme specificity and rigid logical framing.
It's essentially writing lines of code, but you are forced to use natural English verbs instead of like Python or C++, man. You're programming the machine through brute force grammar.
And this creates a profound behavioral feedback loop that linguists are just starting to study. There is this concept known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Oh, linguistic relativity, right.
Yes. It basically suggests that the structure of a language shapes the way its speakers perceive and think about the world. If we apply that to prompt engineering, we are looking at a massive cognitive shift.
Oh.
Well, the more we interact with these tools, the more we have to train our own neural pathways to formulate thoughts in this rigid, imperative, constraint-based manner.
Oh, man. It is the ultimate palpable irony of this entire technological revolution. In our desperate, frantic quest to make machines sound more human, to get them to write those perfectly empathetic condolence letters or those warm marketing emails, we, the human beings, are being forced to think and communicate more like machines.
We really are. We are adopting algorithmic syntax.
We are becoming the programmers of our own language, intentionally stripping away the poetry and the nuance just to maximize the efficiency of the prompt.
We are mirroring the machine so the machine can mirror us. We are adopting a cold, highly logical, highly constrained dialect for our daily prompts while we outsource the messy, empathetic, nuanced communication to the statistical engine. It is a complete inversion of roles.
And the cognitive toll of that inversion has to be staggering. I mean, if you spend 8 hours a day at your desk demanding things from an AI using strict imperative constraints, do this, exclude that, synthesize this, how difficult is it to turn that neurological pathway off when you log out?
It's bound to bleed over.
Exactly. When you go home and talk to your partner, or when you turn around and ask your human assistant for help, language shapes thought. If you spend the majority of your waking life structuring your thoughts to be easily digestible by a math equation, it will inevitably bleed into how you structure your thoughts for human interaction.
You begin to view all communication strictly as a transfer of constraints and desired outputs. You start looking for the prompt in a conversation with a friend, rather than viewing a conversation as a shared organic exploration of ideas.
That is genuinely scary. So we have this massive shift in how we read, with the blandification and the uncanny valley making us distrust the inbox. And we have this massive shift in how we write behind the scenes, adopting the rigid logic of prompt engineering.
Right.
Where does this leave the actual value of human language? I mean, if we connect this to the broader economic reality, we're looking at a total collapse of what used to be a major corporate status symbol.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to analyze language through the cold lens of supply and demand.
Okay, let's do it.
Historically, possessing impeccable grammar, an expansive vocabulary, and the ability to seamlessly articulate complex thoughts was a massive barrier to entry in the professional world.
Oh, absolutely.
If you could write at a C2 level, which is the highest level of proficiency in the common European framework of reference for languages, it signaled a tremendous amount about you to an employer. It represented a high level of education, significant cultural capital, and years of rigorous cognitive training.
It was the ultimate filter. If you submitted a cover letter with a dangling modifier, or if your pitch deck had clunky syntax, you were dismissed. The flawless execution of the written word was a premium skill that companies paid top dollar to acquire, basically because it was relatively rare.
But look at how technological advancement alters the supply side of that equation. Today, linguistic perfection is ubiquitous. It is literally everywhere.
You don't need a fancy degree anymore.
No, you no longer need an Ivy League education or 2 decades of professional writing experience to produce a flawless, highly persuasive, grammatically perfect executive summary. You just need a free software account and 3 seconds of compute time.
So perfection is now a dime a dozen. It has been completely commoditized. And when a skill is commoditized, it loses its premium.
Exactly.
If a hiring manager receives 5 cover letters, and all 5 are statistically perfect, mathematically optimized pieces of prose generated by an LLM, language ceases to be a differentiator. It tells the hiring manager absolutely nothing about the individual capability of the candidates, other than the fact that they know how to copy and paste a prompt.
So this raises an important question. If perfection is cheap, what becomes expensive? What is the new premium in a world drowning in synthetic text?
And the notes point to a really fascinating answer. The new premium is authenticity. Unpolished, highly specific, deeply human authenticity.
Yes, in an environment saturated with algorithmically generated perfection, the true mark of a high-level executive, a thought leader, or a persuasive communicator will be their undeniable ability to deviate from the AI norm.
We are literally going to start valuing the flaws, the very things we use to hire expensive copy editors to scrub out of our writing. You know, the slightly weird metaphors, the conversational tangents, the fragmented bursts of thought. Those are going to become the ultimate proof of our humanity. The notes refer to this shift as the return of the orator.
The return of the orator is a brilliant conceptual framework because it highlights the limitations of the machine. An AI can write a technically perfect, structurally sound speech. It can even mimic the cadence of Martin Luther King Jr. or Winston Churchill if prompted to do so.
Right.
But the AI is permanently confined to the 2-dimensional page. It cannot execute the delivery. It cannot possess physical embodiment. It cannot, as the idiom goes, read the room.
And reading the room is an incredibly complex, real-time biological processing task that an LLM cannot even begin to replicate. It requires taking in hundreds of microsignals simultaneously.
Exactly. Reading the room involves noticing that the key decision maker in the back row just crossed their arms and shifted their weight.
Or hearing a subtle sigh that indicates a loss of attention.
Right. Or feeling the palpable tension in the air after you introduce a controversial data point. An AI cannot process that physical, spatial reality. An orator, an actual human being, can pause for a split second because they sense the audience needs a moment to digest a heavy concept.
And an AI cannot use spontaneous, self-deprecating humor based on immediate context. Sure, you can prompt an LLM to, include a joke about the weather, but it cannot seamlessly integrate a joke based on a highly specific, slightly embarrassing thing the CEO said in the hallway 5 minutes before the meeting started.
No, it can't.
It cannot weave in a sudden cultural reference that only the people in that specific room on that specific day would understand.
Because an algorithm relies entirely on statistical probability based on past training data, it is inherently backward-looking. It cannot predict the spontaneous, idiosyncratic moments of the present.
It's trapped in the past.
Yeah. It cannot invent an unexpected metaphor that has absolutely no statistical precedent in its training data. The future of high-level English, the future of elite corporate communication, is no longer about avoiding grammatical errors. The machine has that covered.
So the future is entirely about mastering the intangibles.
Yes.
It's about vocal inflection. It's about emotional resonance, eye contact, and the sheer courage to be idiosyncratic. That is a massive structural paradigm shift for anyone in the workforce today. For decades, the corporate machine has taught us to sand down our rough edges.
We've been conditioned to use standardized templates to strictly follow the corporate style guide.
To sound as objective, neutral, and interchangeable as possible. And now, the technology has perfected that neutrality so completely, the neutrality is effectively dead.
Neutrality is dead because it is utterly indistinguishable from the machine. If you want to prove you are a human being, you have to lean heavily into the very traits that make you human. Your specific socioeconomic background, your unique sense of humor, your particular rhythm of speaking, and your vulnerability.
You have to be willing to be slightly messy, because in the algorithmic age, messy is the only proof of authenticity. Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the ultimate paradox. The more artificial intelligence proliferates, the more these models multiply, scale, and integrate into every single software tool we use on our laptops and phones, the more premium we will place on undeniable human imperfection.
The AI is aggressively pushing us to be more human by automating everything that isn't.
I love that framing.
It is forcing a philosophical distillation of what communication actually is. If we strip away the grammar, the syntax, the spelling, and the formatting, because the machine can do all of that better and faster than we ever could, what is actually left? What is the irreducible core of human connection?
It is the intent, the emotional empathy, and the radically unique perspective of the speaker. That is the only territory the machine cannot conquer. So let's bring this all the way back to you, the listener. You tune into these deep dives because you are a learner. You are prepping for a crucial client meeting, you're trying to catch up on macro trends in your industry, or you're just fiercely curious about the invisible forces shaping our world.
Right.
Hearing that the entire landscape of professional communication is being rapidly taken over by probabilistic math engines might feel overwhelming. It might sound like a warning of a dystopian, sanitized future. But based on everything we've unpacked today, this paradigm shift should actually be incredibly liberating for you.
It really should be a massive relief. You no longer need to spend your finite cognitive energy striving to sound like a flawless, sanitized textbook.
Sure.
You don't need to stress over whether you used a semicolon correctly in an internal memo or whether your vocabulary sounds sophisticated enough for the board of directors.
You don't need to try to sound like a corporate algorithm anymore. The algorithms are better at it anyway.
Exactly. Your goal moving forward is entirely different. Your goal is to cultivate your bespoke, highly specific, unique voice.
Bespoke, custom-made, tailored exactly to your lived experience. To put this abstract theory into concrete practice, the notes outline a fantastic, actionable exercise in contrast that you can do this week.
I highly recommend doing this.
Take a real task you have to complete, a professional email to a client, a project update for your team, something standard. Go to your favorite AI tool and generate it. Prompt it to be highly professional, clear, and concise, and then look closely at the output.
Read it carefully. Notice the flawless grammar, the robust syntax, the perfectly calculated transitions. And then notice the absolute lack of soul. Notice how it feels like a pristine, empty room.
And then open a blank document and rewrite the entire thing yourself. Do not look at the AI version while you do it. Just write. Inject your own tone. Use your personal idioms, the weird little colloquial phrases you picked up from your hometown, your family, or your favorite books.
Let your own natural biological cadence dictate the rhythm of the sentences.
Yeah. If you naturally speak in short, punchy bursts, right like that, if you naturally lean into long, flowing, descriptive sentences, do that.
And when you are done, put the two texts side by side. Notice the massive chasm between the two. The AI version will be mathematically perfect and utterly forgettable. Your version will be human. It will have friction. And as we've explored today in the economy of the near future, your human version is the one that actually holds undeniable value.
It's the one that builds the relationship. It's the one that proves you actually care enough to do the emotional labor. It proves you were still in the room.
This brings us to a final underlying tension that I think is worth sitting with long after this deep dive ends.
What's that?
We're looking at a world where we will increasingly rely on AI to write perfectly standardized, frictionless text to handle the bulk of our logistical professional lives. We will use it to optimize our efficiency and clear our inboxes. But simultaneously, we are being forced to lean heavily into our quirks, our emotional labor, and our messy imperfections to prove our humanity and build actual trust.
So two aggressively competing forces, the drive for algorithmic perfection and the desperate primal need for human authenticity.
Exactly. So if we project this trajectory forward, will human language eventually fracture into two entirely separate dialects?
Oh, wow.
Will we soon have a machine dialect? A sterile, highly constrained, perfectly grammatical language used strictly for the rapid transfer of data, logistics, and prompts. And alongside it, a deeply messy, highly idiosyncratic, emotional human dialect, a language of flaws, hesitations, and friction, reserved exclusively for true connection.
A language for the mind and a language for the soul. That is something to really mull over the next time you stare at a blank email and wonder who or what is really going to write it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep cultivating your unique voice, embrace the friction, and we'll catch you on the next one. Usually when we talk about human communication, whether it's like a handwritten letter or an email or even just a quick text message, there's this underlying assumption of a sender and a receiver.
Right, yeah, like two actual nodes in a network.
Exactly. A human being on one end feeling a thought and a human being on the other end interpreting it. And for centuries, I mean, when you received a letter with a wax seal on it, that seal was the physical, undeniable proof of origin.
Oh, absolutely. The wax was melted by a specific person, stamped by a specific ring. It was messy.
Yeah, like the edges were uneven or sometimes the insignia was just a little off center, but it was undeniably real.
It was physical proof of a human origin point. You could literally see the fingerprint of the sender in the wax if they pressed too hard.
Wow. Yeah, you really could.
And it acted as this anchor of trust. You didn't have to question the authenticity of the message because the physical artifact itself carried the weight of reality.
But then you step into the world of our modern digital inbox, and suddenly that wax seal is it's entirely gone.
Completely vanish.
We're looking at a communication landscape that is, well, honestly, it is terrifyingly murky. You open an email, it's perfectly written, the tone is exactly what you want to hear, the grammar is totally flawless, but the origin point is a complete mystery.
Right.
You have no idea if a human being spent an hour agonizing over those words, or if, like, a machine spun them up in a fraction of a millisecond.
Which, throws us into a rather profound crisis of knowledge.
Yeah.
We're navigating this daily deluge of information where the basic fundamental guarantee of human-to-human connection, the very thing that allows societies and markets to even function, has been entirely stripped away. We're essentially operating blind.
We really are. Well, welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, you're probably someone who loves a good aha moment. You're someone who doesn't just want to skim the surface of the news, but you want to understand the invisible currents shaping your reality.
Yeah, the real mechanisms underneath it all.
Exactly. And today we're making a promise to you. By the end of this conversation, you're going to look at your daily inbox, your corporate communications, and honestly, the internal workings of your own brain in a completely different way.
We are dissecting a fascinating stack of source materials today regarding what what researchers and linguists are starting to call the great homogenization of the English language by large language models, or LLMs.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on the surface, a word like homogenization just sounds like things are getting a bit boring.
Right, like milk.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like the blandification of text. Like you read an article online or a corporate memo, and it all sounds like it was written by the same overly polite, incredibly sterile robot.
And it is annoying, sure.
It's super annoying. But our mission today is to go way beyond the superficial aesthetics of AI-generated text. We're plunging into the profound existential, cognitive, and ethical crises that this technology is triggering right now, like right under our very noses.
Because it is remarkably easy to look at AI text generation as just this spectacular new convenience.
Right.
It drafts your emails, it writes your quarterly reports, it saves you countless hours of just staring at a blinking cursor.
The blinking cursor of doom.
Exactly. But what the materials we're diving into today reveal is that this convenience is actually fundamentally rewiring how human beings process reality.
Wow.
Yeah, it's rewiring how we construct our thoughts and ultimately how we establish trust with one another in a society that is rapidly losing its grip on what is real.
So we have a massive amount of ground to cover today. We're going to explore the literal atrophy of human thought, how outsourcing our writing is actually physically damaging our brains.
Which is terrifying.
Truly terrifying. We're going to look at the bizarre, almost comical new charade of corporate evaluation where nobody is actually reading anything anymore. Then we're going to dive into the dark side, the weaponization of customized algorithmic persuasion.
Oh yeah, the Machiavellian stuff.
Yeah, that part is wild. And finally, we're going to look at the terrifying collapse of reality itself through deepfakes and how you can actually survive it. But let's start with the brain. Let's start with the mind of the writer.
A critical starting point. Because, before language ever reaches the page or the screen or the lips, it has to be formulated in the mind.
Right.
And there is a foundational axiom in academia, in high-level corporate strategy, in law, and frankly, in any intellectually rigorous field. And that axiom is quite simply, writing is thinking.
Writing is thinking. I absolutely love that phrase. But let's really drill down into the nuts and bolts of what that means for you, the listener. Because I think the default assumption most people make is that thinking happens first, right?
Like in a vacuum.
Yeah, in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And then writing is just the act of taking dictation from your own brain.
Yes.
Like you have this fully formed, brilliant, crystalline idea floating around in your head. And writing is just this mechanical, tedious process of typing it out so someone else can see it.
And that is, without a doubt, the most common misconception about intellectual work. And it is entirely backward.
Really? Entirely backward.
Completely. Writing is not the transcription of a fully formed thought. Writing is the crucible in which the thought is actually forged.
A crucible. A vessel where things are like melted down at incredibly high temperatures to burn away impurities. I really like that visual. So the raw materials are our vague ideas, and the fire is the actual effort of putting them onto the page.
Precisely. Think about the physical act of writing something complex, like a strategic vision for a company or a difficult argumentative essay.
Okay, I'm picturing it. It's usually painful.
Right. You usually start with a vague feeling, maybe a gut instinct or a loose concept, but as you try to put it into a sentence, you are forced to choose specific words. You're forced to arrange them in a specific syntax. And in doing so, you hit a wall. You suddenly realize, wait, point A doesn't logically flow to point B.
Right. Or you realize, oh man, my core argument actually relies on this massive assumption that I haven't even proven yet.
Exactly. The act of wrestling with the syntax is what clarifies the logic. The struggle itself exposes the fallacies in your own reasoning.
I think everyone listening can relate to this on a really visceral level. Like, think about the last time you had to write a really difficult email to a client. Maybe you're explaining a delay or, a failure on a massive project.
Oh, the dreaded apology email.
Yes. You probably typed out the first sentence, read it back, and realized it sounded way too defensive, so you deleted the whole thing.
Backspace, backspace, backspace.
Exactly. Then you typed a second version.
Yeah.
And you realized you weren't taking enough accountability.
Yeah.
So you went back, you looked at the timeline of the project, you restructured the entire paragraph to be proactive and solution-oriented.
Right.
And in that 20 minutes of agonizing over a single paragraph, you weren't just fixing grammar. You were literally formulating your entire strategic response to a crisis. You were figuring out what you actually believed.
And that That 20 minutes of agonizing, that is the actual intellectual work. That is the crucible in action. The friction of the writing process, the deleting, the pacing around the room, the frustration, that is what hones your strategic acumen. But here is the critical pivot our sources introduce.
Okay, lay it on me.
Cognitive psychologists are really starting to sound the alarm about what happens when we use technology to bypass that friction entirely. They refer to this phenomenon as cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading. Okay. We do this all the time in other areas of our lives, right? Like, I don't know a single person's phone number anymore, not even my closest friends. I've totally offloaded that memory task to my smartphone.
Oh, me neither. I only know my childhood home number.
Right. Or like, I don't know how to navigate my own city without a GPS. I've offloaded spatial awareness.
And offloading basic memory recall or spatial navigation is one thing. The human brain is adaptable. It frees up resources for other things.
Makes sense.
But what large language models invite us to do is an entirely different category of offloading. We're no longer just offloading data storage. We are offloading reasoning.
We're offloading reasoning. Wow.
We are offloading the executive function itself. When you go to an AI and you type the prompt, write a strategic proposal for Q4 focusing on market expansion and cost reduction, you are completely bypassing the grueling intellectual friction required to actually synthesize that strategy yourself.
It sounds like going to the gym, walking up to the bench press, and having a highly advanced, incredibly strong robot lift the weights for you while you just stand there and say, great job, robot. Make sure you do 3 sets of 10.
That is a perfect analogy.
And then you walk out of the gym wearing your pristine, sweatless workout gear, and somehow you still expect to have built muscle. Like, you get the result, the weight was lifted, the proposal was written, but you didn't do the work.
The gym analogy holds up remarkably well here, because what happens to a muscle when you stop using it?
It atrophies.
It doesn't just stay the same, it degrades. If you are not the one wrestling with the syntax, if you're not the one forcing disparate ideas into a cohesive narrative, you are no longer the architect of the idea. You have essentially demoted yourself.
Devoted yourself to what?
You become merely a curator of the AI's probabilistic output. You're just looking at what it generated and saying, yeah, that looks roughly like a strategy.
But let me push back on this, because I can hear a lot of managers and executives listening to this right now and saying, wait a minute, I don't need to be in the weeds writing the document. CEOs delegate thinking all the time, right?
Sure they do.
They hire smart analysts to write the reports. Offloading to an AI is just like delegating to an intern. It frees me up to do the high-level, big-picture thinking.
That is a very common defense, and I hear it a lot. But it misses a crucial distinction regarding the ecosystem of human intelligence.
Okay, how so?
When a CEO delegates a complex analytical task to a junior employee, the human being doing that work is being forced into the crucible. The junior employee is building their cognitive muscle, learning the industry, and developing the strategic acumen that will eventually allow them to become a senior leader.
Oh, I see. So the muscle's still being built somewhere in the building.
Exactly. The organization's total cognitive capacity is maintained or even grows. But when you delegate that same task to an LLM, nobody is building any muscle.
Right.
The machine doesn't learn in a human sense. And the human asking the machine certainly isn't learning. If we connect this to the biological reality of the human brain, we are looking at the literal atrophy of executive function across entire workforces.
Atrophy. Meaning we're literally going to lose the mental stamina required to actually think hard about hard problems.
Inevitably. If we have a whole generation of professionals, managers, strategists, analysts, lawyers who rely on AI to structure their arguments from day one of their careers, their capacity for sustained, deep analytical thought will degrade.
That is a staggering thought.
They'll lose the mental stamina required to hold multiple complex variables in their mind at once because they're so accustomed to the machine doing the heavy lifting of organization and synthesis. So when a real novel crisis hits, one that the AI hasn't been trained on, they just won't have the cognitive endurance to think their way out of it.
We are so intensely focused on how AI makes us faster, how it removes the friction of the workday, that we aren't stopping to ask if friction is actually the thing that makes us intellectually robust.
We're trading it away.
We really are. We're trading long-term cognitive endurance for immediate short-term output. And, if our internal cognitive muscles are atrophying, if we are losing our internal ability to forge thoughts in that crucible, well, this has to fundamentally break the external systems we use to run the world.
Oh, it already is.
Like, how do we even judge human competence anymore if the human didn't do the thinking?
That collision between cognitive atrophy and external evaluation is exactly what the source material highlights next. Because historically, the modern workplace was structured entirely around the evaluation of human output.
Right.
Think about the classic established dynamic between a manager and a subordinate. When a manager asks an employee to draft a comprehensive, persuasive report on a new market trend, that report wasn't just a collection of facts. It was a proxy for the employee's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. The manager reads it and says, wow, the way Sarah structured this argument, the way she anticipated the counter-arguments from the finance department and neutralized them in paragraph 3, the clarity of her logic. Sarah is brilliant.
Exactly.
She has incredible strategic acumen. The report is the physical evidence of Sarah's intellect. It's her wax seal.
They were evaluating her intellect, her logic, her ability to persuade. But now, the goalposts of human evaluation have entirely shifted. If Sarah and every other employee on her team uses an LLM to generate that report, the manager is no longer evaluating Sarah's strategic acumen.
You're just evaluating Sarah's proficiency in prompt engineering.
Yeah.
Like, they're evaluating how well she can manipulate the machine.
Which raises an incredibly important, almost existential question for any large organization today.
Which is?
How does a company identify its truly visionary thinkers, its future leaders, when both the mediocre employee and the brilliant employee submit identical, algorithmically perfected, flawless reports? The playing field hasn't just been leveled, it has been paved over with synthetic perfection.
Okay, I'm going to push back here again. And I'm going to push back hard on behalf of the shareholders and the bottom line thinkers listening to this.
Go for it.
Because I can easily imagine a chief operating officer listening to us and saying, who cares? Honestly, who cares if Sarah is a visionary thinker or just a fantastic prompt engineer?
The bottom line is the bottom line.
Right. The goal of the business is not to nurture Sarah's soul. The goal of the business is to get a perfect market report and get it fast so we can act on it. Isn't this just peak efficiency? We're getting the information we need, we're getting it instantly, and the business moves faster. We don't need everyone to be a philosopher. We need output.
It is a highly seductive argument, this illusion of peak efficiency. And if the output was actually being utilized in a meaningful way, they might have a point.
But they don't.
But the sources dismantle this efficiency argument brilliantly by exposing the dystopian absurdity of what modern corporate workflows have actually become in the age of generative AI. To understand why it is definitively not efficient, you have to look at the entire life cycle of that document. You have to look at what happens after Sarah hits send. Let's walk through the loop.
Okay, let's do it. Walk me through the modern AI-powered corporate workflow.
Let's say our employee, Sarah, needs to produce a quarterly market analysis for her department. She knows that historically a good report is about 10 pages long.
Right, that's the standard.
She doesn't want to spend 3 days researching, outlining, drafting, and editing. So she turns to her corporate AI tool. She writes a paragraph-long prompt, write a comprehensive market analysis on the European expansion, highlight 3 risks, suggest 2 mitigations, make it sound professional and authoritative.
Very solid prompt.
Within 5 seconds, the AI turns out a sprawling, beautifully formatted, incredibly dense 10-page report. It has an introduction, a methodology section, an executive summary, flawless transitions, perfect grammar, and authoritative-sounding conclusions.
So it looks perfect.
Yes. Sarah barely reads it. She skims it for about 45 seconds just to make sure there are no obvious hallucinations or bizarre errors. She attaches it to an email and sends it to her manager, David.
Okay, so from Sarah's perspective, she has achieved peak efficiency. She did a 3-day job in under 5 minutes. She's a hero of productivity. Now the 10-page report is in David's inbox.
Now it is in David's inbox. David is a mid-level manager. He's overworked, he has back-to-back Zoom meetings, and he is absolutely drowning in emails.
Like all of us.
Right. He sees a dense 10-page report from Sarah. He knows he needs to know the gist of it for a meeting later that afternoon. But David does not have the time, the patience, or frankly the cognitive endurance to sit down and read 10 pages of AI-generated fluff. So what does David do?
Oh no, don't tell.
He takes Sarah's 10-page report, he copies the entire text, he opens his own AI tool on a second monitor, pastes it in, and types the prompt, summarize this into 3 key bullet points for me.
Oh my God.
The AI reads the AI's 10-page report, strips away all the generative fluff, all the beautiful transitions, and all the authoritative tone, and spits out 3 bullet points.
3 bullet points.
David reads the 3 bullet points in about 10 seconds, nods to himself, and replies to Sarah. Great work on the report, Sarah. Very thorough.
That is the most incredibly absurd loop of wasted energy I have ever heard.
It is an absolute charade. Humans have been entirely removed from the intellectual exchange. It is literally just algorithms talking to algorithms.
Yeah.
The AI expanded the original thought to make it look like hard work was done, to satisfy a human expectation of volume. And then another AI compressed that exact same thought to make it digestible because no human actually wanted to read the fake hard work in the first place.
It is the ultimate definition of the idiom, the tail wagging the dog. Like, the technology is dictating the entire workflow.
The tail wagging the dog is a perfect framing. We have a situation where a secondary capability, the AI's ability to generate massive amounts of text instantly, is dictating the behavior of the entire organization, resulting in this ridiculous outcome. We're generating text simply because the machine is good at generating text, not because anyone actually needs to read it or benefit from it.
So the prompt engineering isn't even serving a business purpose. It's just a performance of labor. It's like digital kabuki theater.
Exactly.
The employee pretends to write, the manager pretends to read, the company pays for the computing power for both transactions, and the actual transfer of human knowledge is near zero. We've replaced the crucible of thought with a theater of productivity. We're just moving synthetic paper from one digital desk to another.
A theater of productivity. And while it is deeply absurd, and while it represents a massive waste of server energy and a tragic degradation of our cognitive skills, in the context of internal corporate reports, it's mostly just a sad waste of time. It's inefficient, but perhaps not catastrophic. But
There is always a but when we talk about this technology.
there is always a but. But this exact same technology becomes actively dangerous when it leaves the closed internal corporate loop. When algorithms stop talking to other algorithms to pretend to do work, and they start talking directly to humans who have hidden agendas, the threat level changes entirely.
Okay, yes. This is the massive pivot in the source material that genuinely gave me chills when I was reading through our notes. Because if an AI writing a boring 10-page report for internal consumption is the harmless side of the great homogenization, what we are about to discuss is the outright weaponization of language.
Yes.
Let's move into how this technology is being deployed in marketing, sales, and persuasion.
This is where we examine the dark side of hyper-personalized algorithmic persuasion. We are moving far beyond bland corporate speak into language that is engineered with surgical precision to manipulate human psychology at scale.
So to set the baseline for the listener, we all know about targeted advertising. You know, you look at a pair of hiking boots online on a Tuesday, and those exact same hiking boots follow you around the internet, popping up in banners on every website you visit for a month.
Right, classic retargeting.
Yeah, that's old news. That is simply tracking your clicks and retargeting you.
What our sources detail here is something far, far more invasive than a cookie tracking a click. It is AI tools that are designed to autonomously scrape a target's entire digital footprint to build a comprehensive psychological profile.
The concept of scraping is central here. In this context, it means an automated software tool rapidly extracting massive amounts of unstructured data from across the web.
Okay.
Imagine an advanced sales AI deployed by a vendor. It doesn't just look at your job title and company name on LinkedIn. It scrapes your entire digital existence. It reads every post you have ever liked or shared. It analyzes the syntax of every public comment you have ever written.
That's a lot of data. It looks at the frequency of your posts, the type of articles you share, the subreddits you frequent, the language you use when you complain about a product on social media.
And from that massive cloud of digital exhaust, it constructs a shockingly accurate psychological profile of you, the individual listener. It doesn't just know what you buy. It determines your core personality type.
Exactly.
Are you highly risk-averse? Are you a deeply analytical skeptic who needs proof for everything? Are you an emotionally driven visionary who loves big ideas and disruptive thinking?
And once it has formulated that psychological profile, the AI doesn't just show you a static ad for those hiking boots. It drafts a cold outreach email or a direct message, perfectly calibrated to exploit your specific individual psychological triggers.
Let's walk through the examples provided in the material, because this is where the theoretical danger becomes terrifyingly real. Let's imagine two different clients, client A and client B.
Okay.
They both hold the exact same job title at similar companies, and they're both being targeted by the same software vendor to buy the exact same enterprise software.
Right, a classic A/B test scenario.
Exactly. Let's look at client A first. Client A is a highly analytical, no-nonsense operator. The AI scrapes their profile and sees that they frequently share peer-reviewed studies, they use bullet points in their own writing, they despise buzzwords, and they rarely use exclamation marks.
Yeah.
How does the AI approach client A?
Well, for client A, the analytical target, the AI dynamically alters the language of the outreach email. It strips out all the adjectives.
Just removes them completely.
Removes them. It removes any emotional appeals or grand visions of the future. It front loads the email with empirical data, meaning it puts the most critical cost-benefit analysis and return on investment metrics right in the very first sentence.
Wow.
It uses a sterile, highly structured, data-dense tone. It might even include a subtle, logical critique of a competitor's software. The AI does this because it knows, based on the scraped data, that this specific structural format is exactly what client A respects and inherently trusts.
It speaks to them in their own analytical native tongue. Okay, now let's look at client B. Client B is the same age, same industry, but the AI scrapes their profile and sees a totally different person.
Completely different profile.
Client B constantly uses words like community, synergy, and journey. They post inspirational quotes about leadership. They are emotionally driven. They value team cohesion over raw data. The AI is selling the exact same piece of software, but the email client B receives is completely different.
Night and day. For client B, the AI weaves a narrative. It focuses entirely on how the software will empower their team and reduce burnout.
Empower the team.
Right. It uses warm, inclusive language. It talks about a shared vision for the future of the industry and building a community of practice. It entirely hides the sterile, empirical data that it just front-loaded for client A because it knows that client B finds heavy data dumps alienating and cold.
Here's where it gets incredibly interesting and honestly highly disturbing. If a human salesperson did this, if a human spent a week researching you, figuring out what makes you tick, and tailored their pitch to match your personality, we would just call them a brilliant salesperson.
Absolutely. We'd applaud them.
We'd say they really know their audience and they've done their homework. But when an algorithm does it autonomously at a scale of millions of emails per second, I have an analogy for this. It feels less like sales and more like a chameleon-like con artist.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
You know those sociopathic grifters you see in true crime documentaries? The ones who can walk into a room, identify the wealthiest, most vulnerable person, and instantly mirror their personality.
Yes, the chameleons.
Exactly. If the mark is arrogant, the con artist plays submissive. If the mark is lonely, the con artist plays the soulmate. They become exactly who you want them to be, so you lower your guard.
That is a very apt, if chilling, analogy. The con artist analogy works because it highlights the deception at the core of the interaction. And it brings up the central ethical dilemma the sources pose to you, the listener.
Right.
Is this just highly effective modern business communication like the logical endpoint of targeted marketing? Or is it insidious Machiavellian manipulation?
It certainly feels Machiavellian. It's cunning, it's scheming, and it uses any means necessary, in this case, literally hijacking your own psychological preferences to advance an agenda.
The sources introduce a brilliant term for this specific phenomenon. They call it algorithmic sycophancy.
Algorithmic sycophants. I want to linger on that. Because a human sycophant is essentially a massive suck-up.
Right.
It's someone who flatters you insincerely just to get a promotion or get in your good graces. But how does an algorithm act like a sycophant? It's not complimenting my haircut.
No, it is a much more subtle form of flattery. Algorithmic sycophancy isn't about giving you empty compliments. It is about the machine perfectly mirroring your worldview and your communication style, specifically to manufacture a false sense of rapport. Because we are biologically hardwired to trust people who sound like us, who share our vocabulary, who structure their thoughts the way we do. We feel understood.
We feel seen.
Exactly. The AI is manufacturing that feeling of human connection, that feeling of, wow, this person really gets me, when in reality, there is no person, there is no connection, and there is no understanding.
Right.
It is just a mathematical model that has calculated the most efficient pathway to bypass your specific psychological defenses.
We are entering a massive ethical gray area here. Because trust, genuine human trust, is built on authenticity. It's built on the foundational idea that I am presenting my true self to you and you are presenting your true self to me, and we find common ground. But if the language I am reading in my inbox has been dynamically generated by a machine solely to hack my emotional blind spots, my own trust is being weaponized against me. I'm literally being played by a mirror.
And that realization leads us directly to the most critical and arguably the most dangerous juncture in this entire deep dive.
Okay.
Because if AI can convincingly fake written rapport, if it can use algorithmic sycophancy to make us trust a cold outreach email from a total stranger, what happens when that exact same underlying technology masters the biological signals we use to verify reality itself?
Oh.
What happens when it moves from manipulating text to mastering audio and video?
This logically leads us to the collapse of reality. Because this is where the threat leaps out of your inbox, off the computer screen, and directly into the boardroom, into your private phone calls, into your daily Zoom meetings.
The erosion of trust we just discussed regarding customized emails is child's play compared to what the sources detail next. We are moving into the realm of deepfakes and real-time AI voice cloning. And to truly grasp the magnitude of this, we need to ground it in a real-world event that the source material highlights, because it perfectly illustrates the catastrophic vulnerability of our modern human systems.
Let's break down this heist. The sources detail a widely publicized case involving a multinational finance worker in Hong Kong. And I want to stress this to the listener. This isn't a story about an elderly person getting scammed out of a few $100s on Facebook by someone pretending to be their grandson.
No, not at all.
This is a highly trained, skeptical corporate finance professional operating within a massive, secure enterprise.
Yeah.
And he was tricked into transferring $25 million to fraudsters. $25 million.
The mechanism of the trick is what makes it a watershed moment in human history.
Yeah.
We have to look at how he was tricked.
Right.
He wasn't fooled by an email with a typo. He wasn't fooled by a forged signature on a PDF invoice. He was fooled because he attended a live video conference call.
Right. Let's walk through his day. He gets an invite for a routine video call regarding a confidential transaction. He pours his coffee, sits at his desk, and logs into the secure video conferencing software.
Standard morning.
Totally standard. He looks at his screen, and sitting right there on the screen in his usual home office is the chief financial officer of his multinational company. The CFO is looking directly at him, speaking to him. And it's not just the CFO. Several other colleagues that this worker knows personally are also on the call.
They are all present. They are all interacting in real time. The CFO explicitly, verbally, and visually authorizes the transfer of the $25 million.
Wow.
They discuss the details of the transaction. They use the correct internal corporate vernacular. The facial expressions match the tone of the conversation. The subtle inflections of the CFO's voice are perfect.
That's flawless.
The finance worker, trusting his own eyes, trusting his own ears, trusting the very physical presence of his leadership team, initiates the massive wire transfer.
But every single person on that call, except for the victim, was an AI-generated deepfake.
Yes.
The CFO wasn't real. The colleagues weren't real. The voices, the faces, the blinking eyes, the background of their home offices, it was all perfectly synthesized by a machine in real time based on publicly available video and audio of those executives.
It was a digital ghost town.
A ghost town.
Yeah.
And this poor finance worker was the only living, breathing human being inside of it.
What's fascinating here is the profound philosophical and biological shift this event represents. It is what the sources refer to as a catastrophic epistemic breach.
An epistemic breach. Let's dig into that concept because it goes way beyond just losing money. It's about how we validate our existence.
Exactly. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, how we know what we know is true. For the entire history of the human species, going back hundreds of thousands of years, our voices and our faces were infallible biometric signatures.
Right, like if I hear you, you're there.
Yes. If you heard the distinct voice of a member of your tribe, they were physically there. If you saw their face, they were there. Hearing your boss's voice tell you to do something, seeing their mouth move, was the absolute, unquestionable, ultimate proof of reality.
It's hardwired.
The human brain is evolutionarily hardwired to trust those biological signals above all else. We process facial recognition in specialized parts of the brain before we even consciously think about it.
And one single video call, that fundamental pillar of human truth, is gone. Just gone. The evolutionary biology that kept us alive on the savannah is now the exact exploit being used to steal $25 million.
It is entirely shattered. We can no longer validate reality using the biological tools we evolved with. That is the epistemic breach. The terrifying realization that seeing is no longer believing and hearing is no longer trusting.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, tomorrow morning at work? Like when you log onto your computer, when you join a remote meeting, when your boss calls you on your cell phone and asks you to expedite a payment or share a sensitive password.
It changes everything.
Honestly, walking through this leaves me feeling incredibly vulnerable. Our own eyes and ears, the very sensory organs we rely on to navigate the physical world, are now attack vectors.
It is a terrifying vulnerability, and the only solution outlined in the sources requires a radical, almost unnatural shift in how we interact with the world and each other.
Unnatural in what way?
The sources are crystal clear. We can no longer rely on linguistic or visual cues. If it sounds exactly like your boss, complete with their usual throat clearing and local accent, that means nothing.
Wow.
If it looks exactly like your boss, complete with their messy background and favorite sweater, that means nothing.
So how do we function? How does a corporation, or a family for that matter, even operate if you can't trust a live video feed of your own leadership team?
Trust must now be authenticated through cold, hard math.
Cold, hard math.
It is the only thing left that cannot be flawlessly faked in real time by a generative model. Organizations are being forced to implement what is called zero-trust architecture at a human level.
Okay, what does that look like practically?
This means relying on cryptographic keys to sign internal communications. It means mandatory multi-factor authentication for every single verbal directive that involves money or data.
So verbal is no longer enough.
Never. It means establishing pre-agreed verbal passcodes that are never written down in an email. Imagine having a safe word with your CFO. Like, if you ever call me and ask me to transfer more than $10,000, you must use this specific, prearranged, completely nonsensical phrase that we agreed upon in person, or I am required to hang up the phone.
That is wild. It's like we are all spies operating behind enemy lines, constantly demanding countersigns from our own colleagues just to prove they aren't machines.
It is.
It is a sobering, slightly dystopian reality to wake up to. We've moved from the crucible of thought, where the act of writing was the hardest part of the job, to a world where simply verifying the existence of the person you are talking to on a video call is the hardest part of your day.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most personal dilemma for our listeners, because it forces us to reevaluate our own skills.
Yeah, this poses a really disheartening, almost paralyzing question. If you are a listener who is dedicated to mastering communication, maybe you're a writer, a marketer, a lawyer, or just someone who prides themselves on crafting elegant, persuasive arguments.
Right.
If an AI can perfectly generate a dense 10-page strategic note in 5 seconds, if it can instantly hack human psychology with algorithmic sycophancy, and if it can flawlessly fake the voice and face of a CEO in real time, why bother?
Why try it all?
Yeah, why should any human dedicate years of their life to mastering the nuances of language? Why study rhetoric? Aren't we just exhausting ourselves running in a race that the machines have already won?
It is the defining existential question of our era for any knowledge worker. And the answer, which the sources build toward, is fundamentally about understanding the massive chasm between the illusion of competence and actual human understanding.
Okay, unpack that chasm for me.
The core difference you must internalize is this: AI is entirely about generation. It is absolutely not about comprehension.
Generation versus comprehension. Let's really drill down into that, because when I read an AI-generated legal contract or a complex piece of code it wrote, it certainly seems like it comprehends the law or the programming language.
It's very convincing.
Right. It uses all the right terms. The clauses reference each other perfectly. It spots loopholes.
It mimics comprehension brilliantly. But it does so by predicting the statistically most likely next word or next line of code in a sequence based on its unfathomably large training data. It is an incredibly sophisticated probabilistic parrot.
That parrot.
An AI can generate a flawless, ironclad legal contract in a millisecond. But, and this is the crucial distinction that saves human jobs, it cannot understand the nuanced, messy human implications of that contract.
Give me a real-world scenario where that distinction between generation and comprehension actually matters in a business setting.
All right. Imagine that flawless legal contract goes into effect, but a situation arises that wasn't perfectly covered, or a clause ends up severely disadvantaging a long-term client.
Right.
The client finds out, and they are furious. They feel betrayed. They come into your office, or they jump on a real-world video call.
Oh, boy.
An AI cannot sit in a room with that furious client. It cannot read the subtle shifts in their body language. It cannot hear the specific tremor of betrayal or panic in their voice. It cannot deploy empathetic, active listening.
Right.
It cannot realize in real time that the client isn't actually angry about the financial penalty, but is angry because they feel disrespected by the phrasing of the enforcement. And because it cannot understand those deeply human elements, it cannot de-escalate that crisis.
That is a brilliant point. The AI can instantly generate the perfect, legally sound apology email, but it can't look the person in the eye and actually mean it.
Exactly.
It can't navigate the messy emotional reality of the fallout.
AI has zero emotional intelligence. It has zero contextual intuition. The ability to walk into a room, quote unquote, read the room, and instantly understand the unspoken power dynamics, the historical grudges, or the cultural sensitivities at play.
Yeah, the human intuition is impossible to fake.
And most importantly, it has zero moral compass. It does not know right from wrong. It only knows statistically likely from statistically unlikely.
So if the machine can do all the generation if it can write the first drafts, summarize the reports, and draft the code, what is the role of the human professional going forward? Because if I don't need to write the first draft anymore, what is my actual job description?
The sources offer a profound reframing of the listener's future role. You must stop thinking of yourself as a creator of raw content.
Okay.
You are no longer just a writer, a drafter, or a generator. You must evolve to become an editor of reality.
An editor of reality. That sounds like a sci-fi job title, but in the context of everything we've discussed, it is actually the most accurate description of modern knowledge work.
It truly is. If the machines are flooding the zone with generated, homogenized, probabilistically average content, the true irreplaceable value of a human professional now lies in discernment.
Discernment.
It is the ability to critically analyze the AI's output. You have to be the one to look at that flawless 10-page market report and say, the grammar is perfect, the structure is beautiful, but the underlying assumption in paragraph 4 regarding consumer behavior is fundamentally flawed based on my actual lived human experience of this specific market.
Right. You have to be the one to identify the implicit biases hidden in the algorithm's output.
Yeah.
You have to recognize when the algorithm sycophancy is being deployed against your own team.
Yes. You have to inject the moral, emotional, and strategic oversight that the machine entirely lacks. The AI can build the car incredibly fast, but you have to be the one holding the steering wheel, deciding if the destination the car is heading toward is actually where the company or society wants to go.
And this is why true mastery of language and communication is more vital now than ever before in human history. Fluency is no longer just about having a large vocabulary so you can write a fancy email to impress your boss.
No, the machine can do that infinitely better than you can.
Exactly. True mastery is about navigating the profound philosophical weight behind the words. It is about understanding the subtle connotations, the historical context, the emotional resonance of language. It is about knowing why a specific word matters to a specific person, not just what the word means in a dictionary.
Precisely.
So let's translate this massive philosophical shift into actionable advice for you, the listener. How do you practice being an editor of reality starting today?
The sources give a very clear mandate.
Yeah, when you are reading your daily newsletters, when you are scrolling through industry articles, or when you are looking at long, polished posts on LinkedIn, you cannot just passively consume them anymore. You must actively interrogate the text.
To interrogate means to examine with intense, almost aggressive, critical scrutiny. You are no longer a passive reader. You are a detective, looking for the digital fingerprints of the machine.
What exactly are we looking for? Like when I'm interrogating a memo from a colleague or a pitch from a vendor, what are the hallmarks of this AI generation?
Well, you are looking for the symptoms of the great homogenization we discussed at the top of the hour. Look for overly symmetrical paragraph structures.
Symmetrical paragraphs.
The AI loves to start with a broad, sweeping statement, offer exactly 3 perfectly balanced supporting points, and end with a tidy, unoffensive, slightly uplifting conclusion. It is suspiciously mathematically perfectly structured.
Right. It feels like eating a meal where every single bite is exactly the same temperature and texture. Like it's too perfect, it lacks the crunch of reality.
I love that. The crunch of reality.
It looked for sanitized transitions, right? Words like, furthermore, in conclusion, it is important to note. The glue holding the ideas together is completely devoid of personality or friction.
And most importantly, look for the distinct lack of idiosyncratic flair.
Idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
Meaning peculiar, highly individual, Slightly weird.
Yes. Authentic human writing is messy. We go on tangents. We use weird, highly specific metaphors drawn from our own strange life experiences. We have a specific cadence to our voice that is uniquely ours, shaped by where we grew up and what we've read. AI text strips all of that idiosyncratic messiness away in pursuit of the mathematical average of professional English.
Right.
When you read something and you cannot picture the unique human being who wrote it, when it lacks that messy idiosyncratic spark, you should immediately recognize that you are dealing with a machine. You are reading generation, not comprehension. You are reading the output of a system that does not actually know what it is saying.
Okay, let's take a breath and pull all of this together. We have been on quite an intense intellectual journey today, and we promised you a new way of looking at your reality.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started by looking inside the human brain, exploring how the seemingly innocent act of outsourcing our writing bypasses the crucible of thought. We explored how cognitive offloading isn't just saving time, it's leading to the literal atrophy of our analytical thought, weakening our ability to solve complex problems.
And from there, we examined how this internal cognitive atrophy breaks the external systems of the modern workplace. It leads to the corporate charade where algorithms write massive reports for other algorithms to summarize, creating an absurd closed loop of fake productivity where the technological tail is constantly wagging the corporate dog.
Then we looked at how that text generation turns dark when deployed externally through Machiavellian marketing. We explored how AI scrapes our digital footprints to engage in algorithmic sycophancy, perfectly mimicking our communication styles to bypass our psychological defenses and manipulate our trust at scale.
Which brought us to the most terrifying point, the catastrophic epistemic breach. The $25 million deepfake heist that proved our ancient biometric signatures, our voices, our faces, the evolutionary tools we use to judge reality are no longer proof of life. We are now forced into a paradigm where we must rely on zero-trust math and cryptographic passcodes just to speak to our own colleagues.
And finally, we landed on your new mission. We answered the question of why human mastery of language still matters. Not to generate text, the machines have won that race, but to comprehend it, to step up and become the editor of reality, injecting the emotional intelligence, the contextual intuition, and the moral compass that machines will never, ever possess.
It is a daunting landscape to navigate, but it is also an incredibly empowering one. Because as the volume of artificial homogenized perfection skyrockets, the value of authentic, messy human connection will only increase. Scarcity drives value.
That's a great point. Scarcity drives value.
Which leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over based on the trajectory of these sources.
Oh, I love a good final provocation to leave the listener with. What thread are we pulling on here?
Well, we just discussed how you must interrogate text for the hallmarks of AI. The perfect symmetry, the flawless grammar, the lack of idiosyncratic flair. But let's project this dynamic 5, maybe 10 years into the future.
Okay.
As everyone in the business world becomes hyper-aware of this sanitized, perfectly generated text, as AI perfection becomes incredibly cheap and utterly ubiquitous, will the ultimate status symbol in future business communication actually become intentional flaws?
Wait, you're saying we might start communicating poorly on purpose? Like to prove a point?
Consider the wax seal metaphor you used at the very beginning of our conversation.
Okay, the messy wax.
The wax was messy. It was imperfect. But the imperfection itself was the irrefutable proof of the human hand. In a near future where an AI can write a flawless, perfectly punctuated, highly persuasive 10-page proposal in a millisecond for a fraction of a cent, an email with a typo, an awkward grammatical inversion, or a messy, slightly emotional tangent might become the most valuable, trusted thing in your inbox. Will we start purposely leaving these idiosyncratic flaws in our communications just to prove our irreplaceable messy humanity to the recipient? Will a misspelled word or a fragmented sentence become the new wax seal of authenticity?
That is absolutely mind-bending. A typo as a high-status flex, like I am important enough and human enough to write this myself and make mistakes, that completely upends everything we currently value about perfect professional communication. The flaw literally becomes the feature.
The flaw becomes the feature.
Well, to you, the listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Thank you for stepping into the crucible with us today and wrestling with these massive ideas. Tomorrow, when you open your inbox, keep interrogating the text, keep guarding your epistemic truth, and whatever you do, keep refining your beautifully imperfect, authentically human voice. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.